Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome once again to the exclusive session at the SME Talent Week. A very special session indeed, because we have with us a renowned leader in the space of scaling organizations. Verne Harnish, he's also known as the growth guy. Verne is the founder of the world-renowned Entrepreneurs Organization, EO. He's also chaired the EO Premier CEO program, the birthing of giants at the MIAT for the last 15 years. And he's the founder and CEO of Gazelles, a global executive education and coaching company with hundreds of partners across the world. Verne has spent over 30 years educating entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial teams, I think from a journey of entrepreneurs in his family to an educator to now being both an entrepreneur and an educator both. So a very good morning, Verne. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Esther, it's glad to be back in India, even if it's virtual.
Thank you so much. I believe you're in Barcelona. I feel very, very jealous. What's the time? What's the time on your side of the world?
Not bad. It's 11 o'clock in the morning.
Wonderful. So I want to thank you for spending your time with us. I know how busy your schedule is. I truly appreciate that you're giving us your time. And before I start the formal questions, I'm curious a little bit about your journey, Verne, because from a family of entrepreneurs, you had seen the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, and you decided to dedicate your life to teach entrepreneurs. And you really have created such a huge impact with so many people in their entrepreneur journey. And earlier this week, we were actually talking to Rudy Carson, who is leading a session tomorrow. And he was sharing how highly your work has impacted him and his journey. So it must be really satisfying to do the work you do.
It is. My grandparents, Esther, had companies. My dad had a very successful company with his partners. And then he lost it all in the 73 recession. And, he never recovered. In fact, I lost my father last year. And I said, you know what? I just don't want to see that happen with other entrepreneurs. And so this is 35th year of kind of dedicating my life to helping entrepreneurs scale up and not go through the pain and misery that our family went through when the company failed.
Yeah. So when you look back at your career, how many entrepreneurs you have touched?
Well, we know it's tens of thousands. We've got 84,000 in the database. They get my weekly insights. And we've sold almost 500,000 copies between mastering the Rockefeller habits and scaling up. And so somewhere in there is a rough idea, probably 40 to 100,000 companies out there.
Wonderful. So now that you play the role of both an educator, which was your personal vision, and now you're also an entrepreneur because you're trying to apply all those learnings into your own organization, what do you enjoy more? Do you enjoy more being an entrepreneur, or do you enjoy being an educator?
Yeah, it's important for an entrepreneur to figure out what they're really great at.
Yeah.
And, all of this stuff about running a company, I don't think I enjoy any more than Steve Jobs did. That's why he had Tim Cook to come in and really run all the operations so he could stay focused on marketing and design, which were his loves. And I'm very much the same way. I love the creation of our new tools and content and books. And then obviously I love the teaching part. And so I've worked hard to bring in leaders, CEOs of our various companies in order to help us scale.
Yeah. So if you were to reflect of all the entrepreneurs you have seen grow, what would it be? What is really what makes them unique? What are the fundamental truths that you have observed on leaders who are being able to scale up? What makes them unique? What are those fundamental truths?
Yeah, by the way, it's an interesting question. There's 11,000 startups an hour in the world. So we're not hurting for startups. The challenge is, how do you scale up to anything beyond just a few employees to several hundred, if not several thousand? And so I actually played a game. Esther, I had students like Rudy at this program at MIT, and I got to watch them over a 3-year period. And I said, can I guess who's going to scale furthest, fastest? And by the way, today I actually place real investment bets on those guesses. And what I discovered was one really fundamental commonality, and that was this unbelievable thirst or hunger to learn. In a way, we're preaching to the choir. Those who are willing to take the time to log in and watch this Google Hangout, you've already kind of proved that hey, I don't think I know it all, and that there's other stuff that I need to learn. And Rudy was one of the most voracious learners. The guy reads hundreds of books. He would be asking questions of the faculty that we had there. And Rudy would be one that would take the initiative to invite the faculty to his company so he could continue to learn from them. You know, Warren Buffett, 500 pages a day. Mark Cuban, he reads 3 hours. Mark Zuckerberg just started the habit of reading a book every 2 weeks. This notion that that leaders are learners is critical.
Do you feel that's an innate curiosity, that desire to learn? Is it something that you have it or you don't, or is it something that can be cultivated?
Yeah, you know, I think this whole nurture nature question, it's always both. One of the things that I remember as a parent reading was that if you want your children to read, it's more important that they see you read than for you to read to them. So I think a lot of it's modeled by our parents and successful people around us. So I think it's a combination of both. And a lot of it's just making up your mind. I pointed in last week's Weekly Insight about a guy who wrote a story who had read about Warren Buffett reading all these pages. And he said, look, I'm going to commit to do something similar, and held himself accountable. By the way, he said, if you would give up your time on social media, you could read the equivalent of 200 books a year. And so, you know, I think somewhere in the middle there is the right balance.
Thank you so much, Verne. Thank you. So when I look at the research that you have written, one of the barriers that you have identified as barriers to scale, now going beyond the leader as an entrepreneur, but really as an organization, one is leadership, the second one is infrastructure and marketing. So tell us more about each one of them and how you feel successful entrepreneurs are able to overcome those.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you know, let's start with infrastructure. You know, it's always been a challenge in India for you just to have the kind of fundamental infrastructure, which I'm so proud of your leader, Modi, going in there and saying, look, we've got to bring those tools to the entrepreneurs that we've got in our country. And what I love about India is the companies have done well despite, you know, really a lack of business infrastructure inside the country. Marketing, that is the fundamental functional weakness. That is the thing that holds companies back from scaling. Said another way, if you've got a strong marketing person as part of that startup team, Ed Roberts' research at MIT found that those companies scaled much further faster. It was the function that Steve Jobs chaired. And you need a strong marketing function, Esther, not just to attract customers, but you need it to attract talent, to attract investors, to attract attention by the media. And the key is first to set aside an hour a week for a marketing meeting separate from sales. And I got to tell you, from startups to companies with several thousand employees, I see a lot of them missing this particular routine. In fact, when Michael Dell took over Dell in 2007, from Kevin Rollins, Kevin had 22 direct reports. They were doing a lot of marketing, but they didn't have a chief marketing officer. And one of the first decisions Michael made was to get one in the company, Mark Jarvis. And that helped increase the revenue 20% over the next 18 months. And so having this separate and well-functioning marketing department is critical. And then the number one barrier is us. And it really comes down to 3 letters, EGO, ego. And I remember Mark Cuban, a lot of folks know him. He owns the Dallas Mavericks, you know, built a company, sold for billions. He was involved early on in the ACE and YEO days, in fact. And we hosted him last year at a summit. And one of the attendees asked him, all right, Mark, you know, you help invest in and run 155 different companies. What's the biggest mistake you've ever made, and what did you learn from it? You know, a good standard question. And Mark gave, you know, kind of a standard answer. Hey, you know, I've made a lot of mistakes, and that seems to be common with those that are most successful. But then he thought for a moment. He said, look, but I've noticed a fact pattern. In almost every case, when I had a failure, it's because I thought I was the smartest person in the room. And that's when I got in trouble. And that's the thing that I learned from Regis McKenna back in the early 80s. He was coaching Steve Jobs and Intel and Genentech. And I was just a student at Wichita State. So I called him up and said, look, Regis, I want to build this global entrepreneurship organization. I need your help. And the first thing he did is he said, look, anytime you face an opportunity or a challenge, first thing you do is take a piece of paper out and you write down every person you can think of that can help you. And then you get a hold of them. It's all about the people that you surround yourself with and trying to be the dumbest person in the room instead of the smartest.
So isn't it a paradox? Because in many ways, as an entrepreneur leader, you are the visionary, you are the person who probably all of us are looking up to. All of us will be looking at you as a leader saying that, okay, if you don't know where we're going, then that's really scary. So how do you keep that, how do I say, that vision and that clarity, and on the other hand being also humble to say, well, you know what, I actually don't know everything. So is that a paradox? Can both coexist?
They do. You know, let's use Sanjeev Mohanty as an example. You know, Sanjeev was brought in to head up Benetton India. As you know, Benetton globally has just not been doing well, and it obviously was not doing well in India. And really, leaders need to make two decisions. First, what we call the big, hairy, audacious goal. And Sanjeev was clear. I want Benetton to become the #1 fashion brand in India, which meant he was going to have to surpass Levi, which had been, you know, the leader for decades. So he set the mountain. He said, that's the hill that we're going to take. And then he was smart enough to realize he didn't have all the answers. And the key routine he put into place was he knew he needed to get back in touch with his customers. And that's hard when you've got millions of customers coming to all your stores throughout India. So he did something very simple. And that's this is critical to marketing. You've got to stay directly in touch with the marketplace on a daily basis. You cannot get isolated. And Sanjeev realized he was kind of isolated. So at the stores, he put a card and he said, look, if you've got any ideas, suggestions, concerns, complaints, here's an email address and send it to me. And he had a whole team that would look at those every day. And Sanjeev himself would glance through to get a feel for what was happening in the field and what his customers were thinking. And then he himself would respond to one of those every day personally. And it was that rapid learning from the customers that allowed him then, as you're heading up the hill, to make the shifts, because there is no straight line in nature, and make the shifts. And sure enough, in 36 months, he took Benetton from kind of a, really a no-name brand to the #1 fashion brand in all of India, and obviously, made himself well known as well.
Wonderful. So I think you've covered some of the aspects of your book, as I'm hearing you, because you use the word routines. You also talked about strategy. And for some of us who may not be aware of your work and the best-selling book, Scaling Up, can you take us about these building blocks? So people, strategy, execution, cash, and routines. You just gave us a beautiful example on routines. How each one of them plays a role in these building blocks for scale?
Well, Esther, those are the 4 key decision areas that you have to get right. So we start with people. Look, you surround yourself with the right people, your life is easy. You surround yourself with the wrong people, your life's going to be difficult. Even that first hire. I remember I was a student at Wichita State and I needed to hire my first assistant. And I took that serious and had over 110 applicants for what was a pretty low paying job, but I wanted to make sure I could get the best person I could afford. And D was critical to helping us scale up that first 36 months. And so first, you've got some people decisions there that you need to get right. And we talk about in the book how to attract the right talent, how to select the right talent, how to keep that talent within your business. Then you've got strategy. If you don't nail your strategy, you're going to kind of waste your next 3 to 5 years on execution. And the essence there is figuring out what's the word or two you can own in the minds of the marketplace. Obviously, Sanjeev was able to really position Benetton as the #1 fashion brand in India. Google owns the word search. When my wife gave birth to our first son 20 years ago, she wanted the safest car, and we got a Volvo. So what's that word or two that you can own in the minds of the market? And then how do you hyper focus? What can you be absolutely the best at? And that's not a hollow question. I mean, the big mistake people make is they try to be everything to everybody. And they forget that when Apple hit its highest market cap 2 months prior to Steve Jobs' untimely death about 5 years ago, Esther, they only had 7% global market share. Yet that 7% represented over 50% of the profitability. Today, they still only have 15% of the global market. Yet they're the most valuable company in the world, over 600 billion. So you don't want all the customers. You just want the most profitable, whether that's at the top or the bottom of the pyramid, as IKEA understands. Execution, then, we've got a set of 10 habits, like making sure you're hearing from your customers directly every week, from your employees every week. And then this thing we're famous for, which is really pushing companies, as Sanjeev did, is drive the business around a daily huddle. And look, all of Silicon Valley is driven by this daily huddle, and we think every company should as well. And with mobile technology, it's easy. And then cash, you just can't run out. And the key is to get your customers to fund you. John Mullins at London Business School wrote a book I call one of the top 5 business books a year ago when it came out, called The Customer Funded Business. And if you think about it, all the Kickstarter and Indiegogo campaigns are all about how do we get customers to pre-buy what it is that we have so we can use the customer's cash. And that's the best than angel investors or anyone else to fuel the growth of your business. So those are the 4 areas, and hopefully 4 quick hints of what entrepreneurs ought to be taking a look at as they scale.
Wonderful. So tell us a little more about these daily huddles. What's the routine within the routine? How do you see organizations leveraging that daily huddle routine in a powerful way?
Yeah, the main thing, and by the way, my favorite business book of all time is by Eli Goldratt, called The Goal. And what Eli taught us was that you really have to understand where is the constraint. As you're climbing that mountain towards your big, hairy, audacious goal, you've got to realize where's the rocks that are in front of you that you need to move aside immediately. And so that's what the daily huddle does. It identifies over the next 12 to 24 hours what's in our way as we continue to scale. And it allows you then to direct your attention to where it's needed the most. If you wait to the week for everything to pile up, first of all, the problems will probably be bigger and there'll be more of them. If you wait till the month, then you're way too late. And so the idea is to kind of clear the path every day. And who's got this is anyone who's programming software knows that at the heart of Scrum and Agile methodologies is this daily huddle where you're figuring out what do we have to do over the next 12 to 24 hours and what's in our way, and let's clear that path. John D. Rockefeller did it 100 years ago, and Steve Jobs did it more recently. Again, as I mentioned, all of Silicon Valley as well.
So how do you manage the short-term orientation to remove the rocks from the path with the fact that you don't really need to be seeing only the next 24 hours, but what is the kind of rhythm that you recommend in terms of, daily huddles and maybe weekly check-ins? And are we then sitting in meetings all the time? How do we manage?
No, you know what? This daily, Esther's 10 minutes. And if you do that 10 minutes right, it'll save you an hour to an hour and a half of emails. And everyone who does it tells us that that's exactly what happens. People don't feel like they got to blind copy you on everything that's going on because you've had a few minutes to talk. And we're a being that for half of our existence on this planet, we've had language. For 100,000 years, we developed this ability to talk and tell stories as a way to survive. Way before we got the written word, which was 5,000 years, or Excel spreadsheets, which is only 50 years old. And so we need these conversations so that we can get have a gut feel for what's going on in the business. And that's why it's powerful. And the reality is you can only be sure about 2 points: where you're going to be 10 years from now, and what do you have to do tomorrow. Everything else in between we call a WAG, a wild ass guess. And, and you just got to adjust course as you encounter the enemy along the way.
Yeah. So how do you recommend that rhythm? So you're talking about the daily and then you're talking about the long term. what is in between? Do you recommend teams to do weekly meetings like Steve Jobs used to do a weekly meeting with his core team, quarterly meetings? What works? What works? Because I think a lot of leaders just spend a lot of time trying to figure out. And in that process, I think a lot of time gets wasted, and probably, a lot of teams also get tired of trying to find that rhythm.
Yeah, first of all, you ought to be spending about, if you're a senior leader, about 10% of your week. That's it, in meetings to run the company. So if you're working 40, 50, 60, 70-hour week, we're talking about 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. That's it. In fact, I just did a Huffington Post piece on one of our clients who's running 5 companies every Thursday. He can do it in 1 day a week. And so it should take no more than that. And the way it looks is daily, it's about 10 to 15 minutes. Weekly, it's about, an hour to hour and a half. Now, if you're a senior leader, we recommend that you're going to be in several of those. Steve Jobs' marketing meeting was 3 hours every Wednesday afternoon. He then had their management meetings Monday morning. So you're going to be in a few hours there as a senior leader. Then once a month, we're really critical. We saw that with Oceana Housing there in India, where we encourage them to bring the 70 leaders of their 5 major projects in from all over India into Delhi for a day once a month. And the Gupta brothers thought I was crazy, but that very first day, they just paid for the next 10 years of monthly meetings with the problem they were able to solve because they got everybody together in a room. And then once a quarter, it's typically sitting down for a day or 2 or 3 days and saying, all right, what did we do last quarter and what do we need to do next quarter? And even the Mark Zuckerbergs understands that once a quarter, you got to bring all your employees together and say, all right, what's the one thing we're going to focus on next? Right now, they're really focused on obviously moving into the video space. And so it's this day, week, month, quarter, year, heartbeat or drumbeat of the business that solves the number one problem in any company the minute you get a second employee, and that is communication. And anyone who's married or in a relationship knows that it's hard enough with 2 people, let alone with 20, 200 or 2,000.
Wonderful. Thanks, Verne. And I'm so excited that I haven't even realized that we just have 8 minutes to go, and we have a lot of questions that have come. So I'm going to move into our audience questions right now. So we have Mona Datta. She is saying, hi, Verne, wonderful session. My question is, can HR and talent management help SMEs to scale, and how? What is the role that you see in HR and talent management leaders to help scaling, and what is the role and how can they help?
Well, first of all, I think they need to get rid of the word HR, human resources. I think it's people development, people experience. So that's what you need to focus on. I'll give you an example. So Michael Dell was smart enough when he had just 50 employees to realize that he was toxic to human beings. And honestly, a lot of entrepreneurs are. Our attitude is we'd love the business if we just didn't have employees or customers, interrupting our visions. And, Michael would just get mad at somebody and say get him out of here. And so he brought in a woman named Barb Kreisman, and Barb acted as that shock absorber between Michael and the rest of the team. So that when Mike would say, look, you got to do something about this person. Barb knew how to go over there and figure out maybe we've got them doing the wrong thing. Maybe they need some training. Maybe they didn't have all the information that they needed. And she stayed in that position for Michael from 50 employees to 40,000. And so it's a vitally critical role. I see it's developed way too late. It normally starts out as the owner's assistant, who's the one supposed to field all the questions from the employees coming into the owner. And then we have a whole section in the book about how you align all of your HR systems around one list, your core values and your purpose. And so anyone in HR, I encourage you to get the book Scaling Up and take a look at that.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Verne. There's one more question, on the similar lines, but it's a little different. What should HR start and stop doing? So stop doing, you've already answered it, which is about stop using the word HR, but probably you may have other feedback for us as well. What should HR start and stop doing to stay relevant to taking the business forward in this dynamic world?
Yeah. Well, first, it's not quite a stop, but you have to realize that you, first of all, if you need to hire people, you need to get a lot of candidates. You need at least 20 quality candidates for every open position. And the reality is HR isn't marketing. And so HR needs to work very close with marketing in order to make sure that we've got a good reputation in the marketplace. So we're attracting high quality talent for whatever position we need in the company. So it makes it much easier then to hire good people. The second thing is HR really needs to start working very closely with IT. And I call it kumbaya meets the pocket protector. You know, they couldn't be more opposite personalities. But the reality is HR and IT have exactly the same job. What you're really building in the 21st century when you're building a company is you're building a brain. You're building this knowledge organization, this learning organization. And HR's job is to make sure that each of the neurons, each of the people in there is the right person and is well trained. Obviously, a lot of that training is now being delivered over technology. And IT's job then is to make sure that that person has exactly the information they need at the moment they need it to make a good decision or help the customer make a good decision. So HR and IT have to realize that they need to work very closely together, and their common job to help the organization and everybody in it make better decisions. That's the fundamental job that they need to get together and do.
Can you share some examples? And we just have another couple of minutes, but I think from where we see HR and IT today to what you're describing, I think there's still a huge gap. So if you could tell us a couple of things that we could do from tomorrow morning to be able to bridge that gap and really accomplish what you spoke about in terms of the desired state.
Yeah, I think number one, literally the head of IT and the head of HR share the same office. As they do at my friend Lisa Ross's company down in Miami. She runs a marketing agency, and she actually set up what she calls the wine cellar, because that's where everybody goes to whine, you know, about HR issues and IT issues. And she put the heads of both of those functions in that room together so that they would then begin to talk. And then all you want to do is find out, all right, what are the issues the customers are having? And where is our gap in either training, hiring, or getting them the information they need so they can take care of the customer? And you just need to focus every day on that question. Now, Sanjeev was able to do that at Benetton because they're hearing from customers every day, real time. And Sanjeev's talking to one of them himself every day. He was able to say, hey, what we've learned, he could get that information very quickly into HR, IT, operations, and every place else that needed to make adjustments to make things better for the customer. Look, at the end of the day, if I could leave everyone with one idea, and that is we all, as organizations and leaders, have just one job. And that job is not to save the world, yes, but that's hard to really operationalize. I want everyone to focus on one thing. Your job's to make someone else's job or life easier. And that's really the fundamental job of a leader. And a lot of employees think the job of a leader is to make my life miserable. But the job of a leader is then to make sure that every employee's job is easier. And often those are HR and IT issues that are in the way of that job being easy. And then ultimately, if we make our employees' job easier, then they can turn around and make our customers' lives and jobs easier as well. So focus on this idea of easy.
Thank you so much, Verne. And if you have a copy of your book nearby, I would love to see the book and take a photo of you right now. And we're going to share it with our viewers and our audience this afternoon. So thank you so much, Verne. It's been fantastic. I didn't even know that we've been talking for half an hour. I want to thank you. And we look forward to seeing you in India at some point very soon.
Yeah, and Esther, you know, you are the most important economy in the world. I've always been bullish on India for decades, though my friends there and all the years I've been coming know that I've been saying that in good times and bad times. You're the largest democracy. You've got a young population. You've been able to do well despite the challenges. And now that you've got some leadership that's getting those challenges out of the way, look, you're going to be a powerful economy, and the world needs you. So keep doing your good work.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day ahead.
Bye, Esther.
Bye-bye. Thank you.